Everyone. Today we will be discussing about the basics of chess. So this will include mostly all the basic needs of a player to start playing a game. It might or might not be proper game, but you will be able to move your pieces correctly, know how each piece moves. So we'll get into that. So before going forward, there are some basic things to remember. This is the starting position. We have the rooks on the sides, followed by the knights, bishops, queen, and king. One common mistake beginners make is they put the white king on the white square, but do remember the white king should always be on the black square, and the black king should always be on the white squares. And the chessboard has 64 squares. So we'll start to note on how to name squares. To name squares, we can see these letters and numbers, and a square is named for the letter and number. So if I click on this square, I just need to see the letter that's below it, which is F, and the number that is on the right side, which is 4. So the name of the square would be F4. Similarly, let's take another example. Can you find the name of the square? Okay, so we'll go down. This is C and number is 5. So C5. Now pause the video and try to figure out which square would be E4. Good. If you have found it out, this is E4. We'll see E and 4. So E4. Now coming to the pieces. So we'll start with the king, and you can read this on the right side as well, that the king is the most important piece of the game. So king is actually the game, and the objective of chess is to checkmate the king, where the king is under attack from a piece and king cannot save itself. Coming to the movement of the king can move in any direction but only one square, like here, 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 here. So you can see even in leeches, when you click on a piece, it shows dots and you can see all the squares the king can move. So any direction but only one square. Now another exercise for the viewers. Pause the videos and try to highlight the squares the king can move to. Okay, so let's highlight. So any direction, up, sideways, one square in all the directions. Awesome. Now moving on to the queen. The queen would be the most powerful piece of the, and it is worth 9 points. The symbol for queen is Q. And like the king, it can move in any direction, but the number of squares is not limited. It can move to any number of squares. Like it can move straight up, straight down, left, right, and even slanty lines or diagonals that we call. So any kind of direction the queen can move. If the queen is here, it can move to A7, which is a diagonal, but it would not be able to move A6. So let's do a demo for the queen. Let's try it. So if I have to highlight all the squares the queen can move, I can say that it can move down, it can move up, it can move to the left, and again any number of square. It does not necessarily mean that the queen has to move to the end. The queen can stop here as well, or it can move one square as well. Whatever the person who is playing wants, the queen can move that many number of squares in straight horizontal lines, vertical lines, and diagonal lines. Now, I would want the viewers to pause the video and try to highlight all the squares this queen can move. Okay, let's get going. So if we look here, this queen can move straight down, but the queen cannot capture their own pieces. So the queen has to stop here. Again, queen cannot jump over pieces. So the queen would not be able to go beyond this point in this downward direction. Diagonally, the queen can still move as many squares as possible. So in her horizontal direction, when we are looking up the upward direction, the queen can move here and there's a black pawn. So if there's a pawn of the opposing color, the piece can capture it. So the queen would be still able to capture this pawn. The queen cannot again jump over the pawn, but it can capture it. Similarly, in this diagonal line, here again, the pawn is of our color, so the queen has to stop here. Coming to the rook. So the rook is 5 points. The symbol for the rook is R, and the rook moves in straight lines only. That is only vertically or horizontally. This rook can move up, down, left, right. Similarly, the black rook as well can move left, right, up and down. So this is more like a plus symbol. So horizontal and vertical only. The rook cannot move in diagonals. If we look at a demo and highlight the squares the rook can move, we can see it can move up and again any number of squares. It can stop here or here or here or here. Similarly, it can move down, left and right. Now for a demo, I would again want the viewers to pause and try to highlight all the squares both the rooks can move. All right. So the white rook, it can move on the sideways again, any number of squares we want. Like the queen, the rook cannot capture their own pieces nor jump over pieces. So the rook in the downward direction, the rook has to stop here. And the rook can capture our enemy's piece but cannot jump over the enemy piece. So it cannot jump there, but it can move straight till it can capture. Or it can stop any other square as well. Similarly, for the black rook, it can move anyway in the horizontal direction as there are no pieces. It cannot move backwards because its own piece is there. And forward, it can move till it captures the white pawn. Moving on to the bishop. So the bishop is 3 points. The symbol for the bishop is B. And they move in diagonal or the slanty lines. So if a bishop is on black color, it will always be moving on black color squares because that's how the diagonals on the chessboards are designed. Similarly, for the other square bishop, if it starts on a white square, it has to move on white squares. Let's look at how the bishop moves. If we highlight, it can again move any number of squares forward and backward, but only in diagonals. So it can stop in wherever we want in between or go to the end. And this is how the bishop moves. Coming to another demo. So how about again the user pauses the video and try to highlight all or figure out all the square the bishop can move. All right. I hope you were able to solve this. So on the backward diagonal point, the bishop can move as many squares as it wants because there are no pieces. The bishop can capture the opponent's piece, so it can also move forward. It cannot capture their own piece nor jump over pieces, so it would not be able to move in this right downward diagonal line. And in the upward variation, it can still move up and capture the enemy pawn. It cannot again jump over the pieces, so it has to stop here. Coming to the knight. So the knight is the trickier piece to move. It's also worth 3 points like the bishop, and the symbol is N. The knight moves like a L, which is two squares, and then you can move left or right. But unlike all the pieces that we have discussed yet, the knight jumps over pieces. So if we look at a L, 1, 2, and left or right, the knight does not move here, here, and goes here. It would directly jump here from here to here. Again, if we look at 1, 2 here, left, 1, 2 right. So again, it would jump. And you can see potentially it moves like a L, but it is actually not moving over these squares. It is jumping over these squares to the other square. And similarly for the black knight, it can move to all the squares. Let's try to highlight all the squares the knight can move in this demo. So we'll start highlighting. It can move here, one, two, and left. So here again, one, two, right here, one, two, left, one, two, right, one, two, left, one, two, right, one, two, left, one, two, right. So all these squares the knight can move. Again, notice the knight is not moving to the side squares, but also actually jumping from this square to the squares it can move to. Now again in this demo, I would like the viewers to pause their videos and try to highlight the squares the knight can move to. Awesome, if you are able to figure it out. So knight can jump over squares, so as well as pieces. So this knight, if you look, can jump over this pawn, come here, one, two, and here. Same, one, two, and here. But if we look at the on the other direction, it can move one, two, but it cannot move to the left because there's a pawn. Knight cannot capture pieces of their own color. In fact, none of the pieces can capture pieces of their own color. So one, two left is not possible, but one, two right is possible. Similarly, one it can jump over opponent's pieces also. One, two here, one, two here, and capture it can capture the opponent's piece. Again, one, two here, one, two. It cannot capture our own piece. Similarly, the black knight can jump over its own pieces. One, two, and left, one, two, and right. But in the right, there's this own piece, so it cannot move there. Similarly, one, two, again jump over its own piece and right, one, two, and left. Similarly, one, two, left, one, two, right. Its own piece is there. One, two, right. Here it can capture their opponent's piece and one, two, left. So this is how the knights move. Coming to the pawns have no symbols and they are worth 1 points. All the pawns start on the second rank for white and on the seventh rank for black. The pawns at their starting position can move 2 steps, while if once they have moved from their initial position, they can only move 1 step forward. So we can see that this pawn is still in its own original position. So it can move 1 step or 2 steps depending on the user's need. Here, like this pawn can move 1 step or it can move 2 steps. But if we look at this pawn which has already moved once, it can only move 1 step. It cannot move more than 1 step. If we look at the demo for the pawns, again, this pawn is at its original position, so it can move 1 step or it can move 2 steps. The pawn has this unique capability that it cannot capture pieces in front of it, but rather pieces that are 1 step on the diagonal to it. So this pawn can either move straight or there's another opponent's piece that is besides it one, so it can capture that. This pawn, on the other hand, does not have any moves because it cannot capture straight and there are no pieces to capture on the diagonals. I hope that the movement of pieces are clear. With this much knowledge, you will be able to start a game and see how each piece moves and play a game. Thank you.